So, welcome everyone. It's really a true honor that you've registered to be a part of our learning community together. My name is Molly Rowan Leach, and welcome to the Essential Qualities of a Restorative Justice Practitioner and Advocate. Tonight's class is 90 minutes long, and it's an interactive as well as, wow, a real journey together of what does this actually mean, these qualities that we would like to share and practice and bring from ourselves into the world, as I'm sure so many of us are already doing so well. It is definitely a journey and not a destination. And I want to just say that both tonight and in class 2, which will be specific skills, key skills that I've observed for facilitation, that there's always room for deeper learning and deeper exploration. And there's going to be some great pieces of what we do together that just help to support you as you approach the work that you're doing, whether it's specific to restorative justice or perhaps an overlap with other skill bases and programs that you might be offering in your community. And I wanted also to remind you that there's a very cordial invitation to each of you who are part of this learning community. Even if you're not here tonight, you've probably seen in the emails that I wanted to offer you a chance to sit one-to-one with me through Zoom or phone, whichever you prefer, to just kind of talk about some of your challenges, some of your edges perhaps around your own work, and just give you a little coaching and some mirroring and reflecting if that's what you would like. I'm also very skilled at supporting organizations as a whole. So if you'd rather use that time to talk about some challenges that you might be having in minding that ever green gap that we have between our values and our practices, please make sure to book your session simply by clicking on the email that was a part, or the email link that was within the contacts that we've had with you. So since we have a lot to cover and we have linear time space limited, let me just, if I could, start by sharing a little bit about myself. My name's Molly Rowan Leach again. I am the director and founder of Restorative Justice on the Rise. And I approach restorative justice as, I believe deeply in it as a result of my own experiences in the field, which are particularly as a facilitator and also as a program director, working within courts, with youth, and otherwise. I just was having a brain lapse because I forgot to share that one of the things that is very important to me is to state, first of all, that I'm a white privileged woman. My pronouns are she, hers, and I am currently residing on Ute territory and lands that the Ute peoples spent immense amounts of times cultivating. And so I always like to start out anything with that. And since we have so much to cover and I want this to be interactive, if you would just take a moment to just give thanks in any way, also to wherever it is that you are, the tribal culture or cultures and traditions that cultivated the lands that you're currently living on and that you primarily reside on and within. So thank you. Like I said, I'm a survivor of family members' incarceration long-term, solitary confinement included. That was a 15-year sentence up in Idaho that began in 1999 and was topped out in 2014. And there's an extensive story and share about that at the Restorative Justice on the Rise website, as well as publications online, if you're curious to learn more about my personal story and why I do this work. Restorative justice is such a universal solution. It's timeless. It really points to our universal basic needs. And those have to do with voice and the power of storytelling and bridging our commonalities and our values, providing safety for expression and respect. There's so much about restorative justice that just makes sense. And of course, honoring the indigenous of our world and the people on the margins who are doing such deep work in bringing us these practices, bringing them into difficult places, bringing them to the surface where we know that we need them to address the difficult pieces of our humanity that are coming to surface very quickly in these times. So I hope that gives you an idea of my experiences that are practical. There's so much to each of our lives, and I'm honoring you in return. I'm really glad that you're here. So, of course, this is a two-part series, including on top of that another 2 hours of consults, and it's brought to you by Restorative Justice on the Rise, the Webucation department of our overall projects, which include podcasting and storytelling, dialogues, and featuring your organizations and your work as well. We love to network. We want to know what you're up to. We love to talk with people and bring work out into the global community that has been built over the last decade, since 2011. So please get in touch with us and connect with us at the social media that we've indicated here. We're doing quite a bit more on video as well, just so you know, and we'll be bringing that out for you in the near future as we rebuild our site. And we're doing some upgrades in the next year that are going to be really fantastic, that signal intersectionality and community and invite even deeper dialogues across cultures. Great. And everybody's voice at the table, even more than it has been. So I wanted to share with you this quote to kind of touch on the overall context of why I'm here and perhaps why you're here. And that comes from an elder and mentor of mine, James O.D., and he is someone who has worked extensively worldwide in social healing and dialogues. And I've had the honor of learning from him, working with him for over 15 years. And here is a picture of Dominic Barter, another teacher and mentor of mine. I also want to honor, I'm going to keep her anonymous, but my Black mama from the Cali area who has taught me a lot, and a former Black Panther. I also have elders and guides from indigenous perspectives, my Choctaw elder teacher, Sequoia Trueblood, who I'm hoping we can bring into tonight's session with a short practice that I have for you if we have time. So, ample evidence indicates that the punitive approach to justice is largely a failure. Former inmates have told me they experienced an atmosphere of fear, hostility, and danger that is traumatizing. If we want less crime, it is time we turn toward the opportunities presented by approaches that engage victim and offender in relational repair. If we never had to face each other after transgression, we would never grow. And that's from James O.D., Cultivating Peace. And of course, we all know tonight together here that ancient practices and teachings, including the Six Nations practices of Thanksgiving, all point to the circle as a place for building trust and understanding, and certainly not only reserved for conflict resolution. So we're coming at restorative justice and advocacy work from a lens of personal practice that translates into our individual, family, community, regional, national, and global lives, because we know that, of course, we impact with our actions, and we can change the narrative with each of our attempts to show how this just makes sense to be a restorative practitioner for ourselves and for one another. And with that, I had promised that we would practice a couple times throughout each of our sessions. And so I'd like to just invite us to, if you are willing, and only with what you feel is appropriate for yourself, get comfortable in your chair for a moment, and we're going to try a simple heart resonance practice, because part of what today's session is looking to provide is support for your presence in your work. And of course, that starts from within us. I'll share a few tips and references after we do this opening practice, but I'm going to go ahead and just gently guide us through it. I'm going to close my eyes and ground in a way that feels appropriate and right for me. I'm going to put my attention now on my breath. And as I breathe slowly and deeply, I'm starting to place my attention from my head area down, sort of like taking an elevator down into my heart area. So I'm going to start breathing into my heart. You can do the practice of holding for 3 or 4 and taking a deep breath, holding it in, and then gently releasing it back out. And as you place your attention on your heart, you might notice a sense of coming back from your busy day, from perhaps some distractions in the outside experiences you've had today. So welcome home, back to your heart and breath. I want us to keep breathing in and out slowly with our attention on our heart. And when you're ready and you feel like you're there and centered in that space, go ahead and think of a person or a place that you feel deeply grateful and deeply at peace whenever you're with them or there. Think of that in your mind's eye. Place that vision in your heart now. And again, this is all voluntary, and truly feel free to do as you see fit. With that vision in your heart of peace, with that person that you're so grateful for, that you know sees you and feels you on your deepest levels and understands who you truly are, or that place that mirrors that very feeling back to you of you are here for a reason, you have a deeply important purpose, and that you're here to be heard and seen equally with everyone else on this planet in this time. And from that space of coherent, deep peace, take just one more moment to think about what you're grateful for right now, right here, and what you would like to share or see or get out of this space together tonight. Even if you're listening in or watching after the fact, meditate on what's most meaningful to you right now. What are you grateful for? And don't forget to keep breathing deep. And as we come back slowly from that space of heart resonance, I would like to just share with you that this is a very simple practice. And perhaps many of you already know of the incredible scientific studies that have been done with heart resonance practice, with the power of our heart. And this slide gives you a reference to the Institute of Heart Math, which is an extraordinary organization based in California doing significant work in helping people to understand that our heart is actually a brain in and of itself. And a lot of us are on a journey of remembrance, so that the science can help us, but of course encouraging us to remember that we truly have inner wisdom that will help us to step into these difficult places that we're serving with such courage. So I hope that that heart resonance practice is something that might be useful. And of course you can spin it in whatever way is right for you or for your group, because there's a lot of different arenas that we all work in and with different backgrounds and heritages, and we want to be respectful of people's needs and practices as much as we can in every way that we move into our work in circle. So I'm recommending this as a way to create coherence for you as a facilitator, that you can do this on your own time as you prepare for whatever it is that you're going to be doing in that particular day, with facilitation work or with even staff work. In a lot of cases, we forget that we also get to do this for each other when we're working on teams. And so coming into, when I say this together, I mean restorative justice and restorative practices. As a group, as a team, it's very important for us to remember to practice what we are offering out to our communities as best we can. And on that note, remembering that this is a journey, and a lot of times there's going to be failures, and we fail and we come back again and again to the circle and do the best we can to create safe spaces when the unexpected or the difficult occur. So I just wanted to share some core beliefs here that I'm already touching on, really. One of them is that I have a very strong belief, excuse me. Cheers to the full moon tonight, lemon tea. Restorative practices start with us as individuals. We can step into service with deepest efficacy when we have clarity about our own needs and practices, as well as about facilitation and advocacy. We also really need to have a grounding practice that can diffuse and transmute some of the typical edges in the restorative justice arena for ourselves and for others, as I mentioned. And when we increase self-awareness and enjoy our limitations as growth and expansion points, we can happily land in the seat of facilitator or advocate with a deeper compass for service. And I'd just like to share a very important foundational core assumptions from Kate Pranis and Carolyn Boyce Watson. But before I do that, I'd love to invite people who have just been arriving to check in, if you'd like. In order to check in, you can either simply unmute yourself, or we could also move over to the chat room and open that up. So I just want to wish everyone a warm welcome and see if there's anybody that has an opening check-in that they'd like to do or a reflection. So we're just going to take a moment to offer that space. Okay. Again, it's really great to have you here. Looks like, Robert, did you want to speak? It looks like your mic was just about to unmute. Come on in, welcome.
I was just going to say hello to everybody, and I'm here. Is that right?
And you are in the Santa Cruz area, correct?
That's right.
Welcome, Robert. And please don't feel obligated to chime in.
Okay.
This is an interactive class, but certainly it's also going to have its presentation. I have a style where I really like to be inclusive and pause. So I just want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable with the space that we're in together. It's nice to see you, Robert. I see you. Yep, there you are. Okay, so please feel free to chime in if you have questions or needs along the way. And for those of you that came in a little bit after we started, today's class is going to be really about cultivating presence and kind of the bigger picture of how we show up with essential qualities and what those mean to us, a few practices. And then next week, we're going to be looking at very specific ground level applicable skills that seem very important as we approach facilitation. And of course, this is all based in the deep-rooted nature of restorative justice as relating to balance in ourselves, in others, and how we create that in our world, what balance and equanimity means. So it starts with us, really. So many of you know who Kay Pranis and Carolyn Boyce Watson are, but if you have not seen their work or discovered their books, I can't recommend them more deeply. Kay Pranis has graced us with mentorship all year with our Connection series, and she's a good friend and colleague. I personally have learned very much from her over the last decade, and so I highly recommend, if you haven't looked up their work, go to Living Justice Press, which is cited here on the slide. But the 7 core assumptions are really deeply foundational to our individual and collective work. And of course, the true self in everyone is good, wise, and powerful. And then the world is profoundly connected. And 3, all human beings have a deep desire to be in good relationship. 4, all human beings have gifts and everyone is needed for what they bring. 5, everything we need to make positive change is already here. Human beings are holistic. And finally, 7, we need practices to build habits of living from the core self. And so those practices that build habits, that's a really fascinating and juicy phrase that really applies to what we're looking at here together, because of the implications of how we can reframe our language using nonviolent communication, which we'll talk more deeply about next week. How we can reframe our language and even habituate the way we frame our language, which changes our relationship to one another and to our ability to communicate the meaning that we wish to communicate. And especially, of course, when things go out of balance, but also simply in building stronger communities, whether it's your family, your community at large, bringing together people from various backgrounds and race and cultural perspectives, having intersectional dialogues. We definitely want to come equipped with all the practices that create just, we could do it in our sleep, really, to speak in a way and to act in a way and to hold spaces in a way that are from that core self, that bring down the masks, that create the safety and the trust that are inherent in spaces that go the deepest for the needs of our community. So thank you to Kay Pranis and Carolyn Boyce Watson for all of their work. And I highly recommend, if you do work in schools, that you might, if you have not already, check out Heart of Hope and Circle Forward, which are both excellent guidebooks. And I will be including a resources citation for you in the materials that you receive after each class. So I want to make sure that you get goodies and recommendations. Many of you may already know about some of them, but perhaps there's some new pieces in what we'll be doing together that will support you and help to guide you in a certain way towards what you need for your particular community and your work. It would be really wonderful too at some point to hear from you about what you are doing and what you would like to see, like we did in the opening meditation, out of this class. So at some point, I'm going to stop again and we're going to look and see if anybody has a reflection on that note. So in the distillation of time that I've had the honor of listening and learning from many teachers in this field, including Kay Pranis and the others that I've mentioned, and many, many others from many global traditions. And of course, there's various ways to step into a circle. There's different models. But everything points back to, in what I've been hearing over the past decade, to the fact that if we can hold with compassion, and maybe even this first one with fierce compassion, because we also have to act. As the Dalai Lama says, compassion is not enough. We must act. And I truly believe that, and especially as it concerns systems transformation. So, but if we can hold the idea that, as Kay Pranis says, we are literally rolling a boulder up a mountainside, and the more that we can be in sync together in rolling that boulder, we still have the perspective that we're unwiring a very deeply embedded system. So that's why I mentioned here, we have to really recognize that we've lived in a punitive, colonized, white male privileged, justice oriented towards punishment and not humanizing. And it's wired into our contemporary society. So it's wired into our brains. It's wired into our language, as Marshall Rosenberg of Nonviolent Communication so poignantly puts, that, really this is a jackal society everywhere we look. So once we can name what's going on and be honest about it and call it out, we can start to work together to build those solutions and really try and keep our focus as much as possible, on the solutions instead of on the deeply disturbing problems that we face, without denying them, of course. Every restorative and compassionate act has impact, and it's never too late. So a lot of times we get in a rush and we really want to see healing. We really want to, bring people to the table. We really, personally, I know for myself, boy, have I really wanted to have resolution with certain major conflicts in my own life, in the community, and more widely. But restorative justice, the next one, has its own timeline, and also it's always voluntary. So encouraging ourselves and each other to trust that once we provide the invitation to step in, once we know that we personally have done everything we can to offer some form of resolution within our own personal conflicts, within our own inner system of understanding, then we have to give it to perhaps whatever greater trust that you might have, to understand that not everybody's going to line up and be as excited as we might be for this. There's tools and tips, for example, that I would love to share with you about listening processes and sharing information with people who are very skeptical or resistant to what restorative justice shares and can cultivate. It takes time to unwind the natural defenses we all have from colonized isolation, segregation, oppression, privilege, and bias. And so, as a white privileged woman who also has been in the trenches of oppression in various pockets of my own life, again, you know, the timeline that we have here is it's difficult to want to offer something and then see that it's not wanted. But in my experience, I've seen that there's even ways to offer restorative practices in a surrogate aspect. Like there's different ways to answer to the needs of the people who want to and are willing to participate. I also want to say that as this next line, feedback is a friend if we want it to be. One of the things that I've identified in my work in organizations and in witnessing other organizations' challenges and working with all these amazing people all over the world that I'm lucky enough to know and connect with, we have a real problem and challenge with feedback as human beings. And a restorative approach to feedback is really exciting because it signals to us that we can make friends with any kind of feedback and that it's a loop. It's a signal from life through another person that we can step into whatever it is that we're doing and receiving with growth in mind, with growth and learning, and see it from a light of the universe or the cosmos or life in general is on our side and working with and for us and for all of us in a benevolent way. And of course, we need one another. We don't live in a vacuum. And restorative practices and circle processes, community building, connection circles, conflict resolution processes, they are wonderful because they include people who can mirror to one another the meaning and the impact, or that can cross important biases and blindnesses that we all come into life with, or perhaps just, you know, for whatever reason are on our own journey of waking up in this moment to the things that other people are experiencing across the world. Our LGBTQ plus community, our Black community, so many people, our indigenous communities have been oppressed for so long. And as a white female, privileged, even in my own situations of witnessing oppression and living it through mass incarceration, I still realize that there is a lot that we can do to raise the bar on courageous dialogue and conversation that addresses directly people's experiences and remove some of the divides. I'm not saying that it's a fast thing or that it's going to happen overnight, but we do need one another, and we have a lot to learn, especially from those who have suffered. And generationally, many of us were not taught the skills we are now learning and practicing. So keeping that in mind, that's a pretty big concept, isn't it? Like, have you ever thought about what it's like to, you know, maybe picture your parents or their parents? I know that in the United States, my parents' generation was called the silent generation. And I find that ironic because really there was not much talk about deeper needs. And those needs got repressed. A lot of times people didn't feel like they had a voice. And so having this opportunity to reweave and re-embody the skills that were not taught to us, that our previous generations, at least I'm speaking again with my own biased lens of white privilege, but in many cases across culture and race, there still may be, this sense that we don't even know how to communicate with compassion and nonviolence. We don't know, and yet we do, is the point that I'd love to make, and to remind all of us to remember that we also have intergenerational responsibility. 7 generations before and the 7 coming forward. This is our moment to reweave in a good way, in what might be called the beauty way, of taking away the wounds that have been handed down over generations, to rewriting the narrative of our own families. So I see it from that perspective too. And I hope if that's not something that you necessarily share as your view, it's something to keep in mind in whatever view you feel comfortable with, that we really do have intergenerational harm and wounding, all of us. And what an opportunity we are sitting with right now, and especially if we're involved in offering circle and offering healing practices and modalities within our communities. So I want to get probably going a little bit more quickly here, but I want to just build that foundation with you still of what we're doing together, food for thought for you, for how you are building your practice with compassion. Again, these are distilled ideas from my own listening and work as a host and a dialogue coordinator, as well as a program director. So I hope these are useful, some of them, if not all. And of course, we always want to remember and to act in every way possible to improve ourselves, in showing up, in signaling, and in our words. So not just tokenizing the fact that there's a seat at the table for humanity, all voices, identities, cultures, and races. It's our job, it's our work to recognize our own biases and listen to others who have experienced outright oppression, violence, and intergenerational trauma. And of course, always give thanks and honor to the indigenous lands upon which you live and work, which, again, I'm sitting on Ute lands, giving thanks for the care and concern and attention that they gave to the land and to all living beings. And of course, to Grandmother Chapeta, who was the first woman to sit and smoke the peace pipe here in this region. And of course, when in doubt, slow down and go outside. Listen to the rhythms of Mother Earth in whatever way you see fit. It's so regenerating, and that's not just an idea. It's scientifically proven that the more time that we're outside, the more time we spend connecting with Mother Earth and with nature and being quiet, we regenerate our own batteries, our own beings. I'd like to also invite a couple last pieces here. Spend some time each day, if you feel like you would like to, considering bias and the predicament of others. Of course, that's empathy, an empathy practice. And then practice Tonglen, which is a Buddhist practice that Pema Chodron knows much better than I do. Pema lives south of here by about an hour, up on a hill near a stupa in Crestone, and she's, as I'm sure most of you know who she is, she's a wonderful Buddhist teacher. And Tonglen is, of course, something that is very helpful, not unlike the heart resonance practice, for remembering that from the Buddhist perspective, everyone is our mother, and transmuting resentment, hate, and anger at people or systems. So I find a lot of times one of my struggles has been with resentment at systems. Like, how could we be so stupid? And I get really upset because I've worked in courts, I've worked in the patriarchal and biased systems, and they can be so debilitating. And just, seeing what it's like to be, um, experiencing what it's like to be within a prison, and the way people are treated. They're not treated with humanity. They're numbers only. They are fed terrible food and given very slipshod health care. And these are all facts that I've observed firsthand. Their women are chained and bound to their bed, giving birth still. And a lot of times there is no budget for fixing, midwinter heating issues. There's conditions within prisons, and I think we all know this here, but it still needs to be called out continuously until it changes. So I guess what I'm trying to convey is, remember to include in whatever practice feels right to you to cultivate your own presence and strength around transmuting that resentment towards these systems. Not all of you may feel resentment. Maybe you're motivated in various ways and impassioned in various ways. But I just want to honor that if you do have anger or resentment, that's so normal. It's a part of being a social justice advocate. And I can tell you I have mine, and I've worked with it deeply especially in the last decade. And don't forget to love yourself, because you're a gift from the cosmos. And like Kay and Carolyn have said in those core assumptions, that you have a deep, deep story and gift to bring. Don't be afraid to shine and bring it. And don't be afraid of failure either. It's a great feedback system. So I'm going to just review with you. We don't have to go through all of these right now. We're not going to, but this is what I had promised. It's a huge chunk of information, I realize. But before we go into our next kind of area tonight, where we're going to look at specific pieces of our personal presence, I'm going to go ahead and pause and see if anybody would like to check in or reflect. So. And you don't feel obligated, please, to use the video. If you'd rather just take your mic off, unmute it, that is, please feel free.
This is Ron in San Luis Obispo. Can you hear me?
Hi, Ron. Welcome.
Hi. Oh, thank you, Molly.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you. Are you seeing me?
No, I'm not seeing you.
Oh, okay. Oh, good. The room's a mess.
Good to have you with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and just following along.
Okay, great. I just want people to feel included in, that this is presentation and discussion. So welcome. Anyone else care to check in and say hello?
Stas.
Hi, welcome.
Yeah, from Oakland, California. I'm really happy to be here. I arrived late, so I apologize for that. But very excited and feel like it's a good place to be.
Wonderful. And you go by Stas?
Stas, S-T-A-S. Yeah.
Wonderful. It's really wonderful to see your face, too.
It's the end of the day.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
Welcome. I want to share when I first started doing media work in the field of restorative justice, I was terrified. And I just started doing video work because I feel like it helps there to be even more connection. And so admittedly, I was a little shy about that, but I'm glad that I stepped in even still, because I feel like this helps us to create even more community than just a teleconference line can create. So thank you if you're feeling shy too. Okay, so like I've shared, I love feedback. I love people chiming in spontaneously. So given that we have a whole chunk of stuff still to share tonight, and we're already almost an hour in, I'm going to speed it up just a little bit as best I can. I have a very slow style. I actually kind of like to have a slow style because this world is so fast now. And one of the things that I actually realized I didn't touch on in this list was the need for disconnecting from technology on a periodic basis. The rate and pace in which technology, I don't know how many of you are on like apps like Twitter and Facebook and really plugging into those periodically throughout your day. But one of the areas that is really important to me and that I'm observing right now is just how quickly the pace has ramped up, and the dialogue and the narrative can be very crazy making if we stay on there too long. So with some of the pieces around self-care and our support network, which is on our list, one of the self-care pieces that I would highly recommend if you're not already doing is, to take a fast from media and tech for at least a day a week, if not more. And some people have managed to not get smartphones. I resisted for many years, but I admit that I still, at this point, I have a smartphone. So some of the biggies on this list, again, self-care and support network is huge. That's a missing piece that I've identified and others have identified as practitioners and advocates. What we're missing is right under our noses, that we know at least 2 to 3 people that we could reach out to decompress after a difficult circle, to have outside of our organization to rely on if we're working within an organization or a project that's providing services. It is just really critical. And of course, it probably seems obvious, but I mean, even Dominic Barter of Restorative Circles, who I'm doing a lot of ongoing work with, his work all over the world, he talked for an entire session this year in our mentoring series about this very thing, self-care and support network, because it's that important. Meditation or spiritual practice as pillar for presence. This thing that we call presence is so critical to how we show up, not just in our work, in our service, but to ourselves, and really appreciating that the more coherent and self-compassionate and loving we can be, the more we can truly help one another, to serve others, that is. The idea that there's this thing called perfection, I've seen a lot also in the field, where we seem resistant to really recognize that each of us are broken, so to speak, that we each have brokenness. But can we embrace that for ourselves and one another, so that there's no shame when we have the naturally arising conflicts that we will have, whether it's within our organization or wherever it may be? Can we hold each other as these beautiful, broken, and just very powerful human beings. I mean, we are powerful human beings, but we minimize that in our shame because we feel isolated and disconnected from our tribe, from our Sangha, from our community. So a big question in the restorative justice field that I'm observing is, how do we embrace brokenness and also become more elastic and receptive to feedback loops that may not look pretty or easy to digest, whether it's related directly to us or just to the general work that we're doing. Oh boy, so here I said I wasn't going to go into these, but these are all so important. Deep listening is so critical. I'll say more about that, especially next week. Here we are at receiving and giving empathic feedback. Already kind of spoke to that a moment ago. The witness, that is a personal practice that many of you may already have in place. It's detangling ourselves from our mind chatter and our monkey brain. We are not our thoughts, as if any of you are Buddhist practitioners or interested in some of those teachings, you know that we're watching our thoughts like clouds passing by when we're in meditation, or even when we're in action in our lives throughout our days. We can detangle ourselves and de-identify from the thoughts that come through and that want to kind of hold a lot of real estate in our minds, and try and make us think that we are them. The witness is a great practice. If we have time today or next week, we will do it together, but I may just stick that into your resources to do at your own pace. It's from Michael Singer, who is the author of The Untethered Soul. Highly recommend that book, and again, I'll make sure it's in the resources. Nonviolent communication, we'll talk about that next week. Reflection for meaning and navigating conflict, very important. Reflection for meaning is a key aspect of facilitation that really takes it to a deeper level. Again, I may be speaking the obvious to some of you seasoned practitioners. Trusting the collective wisdom. This is another one that is huge. Have you ever noticed that in a circle, somebody will speak to something that's really on your heart or mind, and without you saying anything, you'll notice that the circle becomes a coherent sort of group coherence, and a group mind and a group speak. So whatever's on the hearts and minds of the group often will come out, even if it doesn't directly come from you. It will directly be mirrored, though, in what is contributed as a need or an expression into the circle. So trusting our collective wisdom, and also as a facilitator, which again, more specific about it next week, but trusting the collective wisdom and getting out of the way as a facilitator, because we're definitely not therapists, we're guides, and that can be difficult. That can be really hard. So we're not there to give therapy. We're there to help each individual in the community of the circle co-own the space together and find ways to awarenesses and to meeting needs and agreements, if that's what we're there to do in that space together, depending on the form of the circle. Humility and radical trust. Trauma and de-shaming. There's so much information out there right now about trauma-informed practices. I'd love to go more deeply into that with you. And of course, heart coherence is something that we've already talked about even just now in today's session. Stillness and silence, biases and privilege. Very, very critical right now that we really are taking honest, humble looks at ourselves and inviting truthful conversations. They can be difficult, embarrassing even, but they're very important to be had. And of course, this thing called regulation. How are we regulating ourselves so that we can step in? How are we offering tips for regulation that connect with the unique individual? And if we forget to breathe, everything else kind of falls apart, doesn't it? So breath work is always a great way to continue to work with what we need individually. I do a lot of yogic breath work. I would be happy in our consult session, which I've offered to you to book privately with me for up to 2 hours if you need that. We can talk about some of these areas specific to your needs. And then again, recognizing intergenerational trauma and patterns. I highly recommend, if you've never heard of constellation work, it's a very interesting and critical area of epigenetics. And it looks into how our trauma and wounding is definitely and almost uncannily passed down. I'll talk more about that if you would like me to, and certainly refer in the resources to it so that you have some quality books and references. The worldview work is so critical. A lot of times we get in our blinders about what is our position. Carlos Castaneda talks about the point of reference, and the more we can shift our point of reference to widen and even widen more, and know for a fact that there's scientific studies out there that we are in fact interconnected. Lynn McTaggart's work is great. Dean Radin's work. Let's see, just trying to think, Bruce Lipton and the biology of belief. If you're interested in that, those will be in your resources. And of course, our whole brain capacities and neuroscience and neurochemistry, what wires together, fires together, and mirror neurons and all of that work. And of course, nature and earth is teacher, and then a sense of humor. So these are all very critical areas. And I just wanted to talk to you and with you about what it means to be a restorative practices facilitator. Hopefully this isn't redundant information for you, but very briefly, which I mentioned a moment ago, a restorative practices facilitator can mean working in a school with your children in your class, elementary through 12. Teachers are more and more working together with their classrooms to determine class values and to do check-in circles that are like called connection circles. Those are non-conflict related and would be what might be considered tier 1 practices within schools. Tier 1 meaning, why are we doing it? Well, we're doing it to build trust and relationship, which are two really big values of restorative justice and practices. Trust and relationship. And relationships are built on trust. And we find that circles, connection circles, give people a voice. It's not mandatory that everybody speaks, but that's one of the opportunities for facilitation. And again, even in these types of circles, the goal of the facilitator is that there's co-ownership in the process, and that it's not just simply, a therapist or a teacher working with a class and kind of sort of giving them opportunities to chime in. It's definitely a co-owned system, and the facilitator is the guide. And so a restorative practices facilitator does have some responsibilities to uphold the values of the circle that everybody has hopefully had a chance to chime in on. This class itself is not a circle process specifics class, but I would be more than happy to refer you to information that would help you have more understanding, if you need that, of how circles go. Kay Pranis's books that I mentioned give wonderful suggestions for how to build a community building connection circle, as well as restorative justice conflict-related response systems that are built upon these connection circles. Not everybody does it the same way, but again, the restorative practices facilitator is there to guide the rounds and the process, and to also identify if some redirection needs to happen around the values. Let's say, for example, somebody might speak out of turn, or there might be some tension that arises. Sometimes a circle will be paused when there's some really deep stuff going on that just, the facilitator calls it out and just says, we're going to pause for 5 minutes and come back. I know a lot of people have varying ideas about that, but I've seen it actually really help, especially in conflict-related circles. So there's, varying perspectives on facilitation, but one of the things that holds very true that I have learned and witnessed, again, is the more that the facilitator can get out of the way, the more we can listen and guide. And then if we can, with acumen, quickly redirect or pause, and help the process along to where, although, talking circles from indigenous spaces would go overnight or even days long. Unfortunately, in the American, linear time spaces, a lot of times we don't have the ability to go overnight and let everybody have a really long time to speak and all of that. So that said, there are parameters that had to be massaged in these systems for, for the way that systems work here, at least in North America. And certainly that's for better or for worse. But a lot of times it is showing still to be effective. And I'm seeing that there's chats coming in, so I'm going to go over and peek in. Oh, yeah, thank you. Great question. Native Harmony asks, can you offer some helpful language to use when redirect or pause is necessary? So the first thing I would say to that, and thank you for that question, is to frame the request using the wonderful, would you be willing? And I wish I could see everybody's hand. How many of you know, would you be willing? And so I can see Stas knows, and I'm sure a lot of us do, but I'm just going to say thank you to the spirit of Marshall Rosenberg for that phrase, also known as WYBW, if you like, what do you call it, the short form. So you can remember, would you be willing for something like this? And you can put it into action by saying, for example, would you be willing to come back to the values that we shared together as a group and agreed to co-own? Acronyms, that's right. Thank you, Stas. So some form of request that points back to the fact that everybody in the circle, I would hope, got a chance to agree to the way in which we were going to move in the circle together. So including with the talking piece being, that only the person holding the talking piece is speaking. Or, we agree to speak respectfully. If that's not happening, then we come back to revisiting that value. So would you be willing to come back together with everyone here to the value of whatever it might be that's not working for that person? So I hope that's helpful, and certainly there's other ways to do it unique to that specific moment. But my best advice is to always use the nonviolent communication frame, and then to point it to gently to like whatever it is that's challenging that individual in the moment that relates to the values that were agreed upon. I hope that helps. Would you give me a meaning check or an affirm if I've answered that question, Native Harmony, so that
Hi.
I know?
Yeah, thank you. This is Carmen. I'm sorry it says Native Harmony.
That's okay.
That's my email.
Yeah. Does that help?
Yes, and more specifically, I've struggled sometimes when I'm running a circle, um, uh, where we set up a sort of a time frame for each person to speak,
Uh-huh.
and the person with the talking piece keeps going on and on and on, and so I want to be able to sort of find some language to lovingly
Yeah.
move it to the next person.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're making the time parameters together as an agreement before you commence the circle. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. But as we all do, we end up going longer and even longer, self included, than is, what we agreed on. So,
Correct. And it's a circle for white people working on becoming anti-racist. And so a big piece, obviously, of whiteness is over talking.
Yeah.
You're laughing, Stas. You can relate.
I was going to say, one of the ways I do it, especially if there are lots of people who are tendent to talk a lot, is I actually have a set of rocks that I click at the 30 seconds before their time would be wrapping up. So I'm not interrupting anything, but and I got them from the river, and I tell the story about the rocks, and so they become sacred in that process too. And I find that you're not interrupting.
Now, those rocks are a wonderful idea. I'm curious to know if that's an agreement also that's made with the group before you go into your rounds. That's a part of, you said you told the story about the rocks and everything.
Yeah, and I'll ask folks if it's okay if we use the rocks as timekeeping. So yeah, I mean, I work with college students mostly, so I have a little bit more maneuverable space to work than with folks who aren't beholden in the same way. But I find most folks are really open to something that makes a gentle noise and makes it so you're not interrupting, but they are conscious of.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Thank you for letting me share.
I love that. I know that, some people also feel very sensitive in circle to affirmations, this is a little different than what we're talking about, but I just want to bring up that, as a facilitator, also, especially with youth and schools and everything, this is an affirmation piece that I see happening in circles. Unless we can do that for everyone, though, then that becomes really kind of this signal for some people who don't get the clicks that, well, why didn't I get affirmed in that way? So we have to be really, really super sensitive and careful about how we move together, so that we can then move for real together and not unintentionally, in most cases, disinclude. But honestly, the best way to move along discussion and to redirect when we're coming off, off of our hopefully previously agreed upon values is to frame those requests in a way that you feel is appropriate, based in NVC. So you could even, you could make an observation, just like the basic NVC principles demonstrate of, observations, needs, feelings, and doable requests. And I love talking about NVC. I do believe NVC is a beautiful way to rewire ourselves, and it really does change environments. So when all else fails, remember your NVC skills, which I know I know you all have, because that's obvious. And thank you for your wonderful work, Stas. And sorry, Native Harmony, was it Katrina? I'm sorry, I didn't get your full name. Carmen, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. So I don't want to stay too long in this piece, but hopefully on the next session, we'll come back. I know we're going to come back to very specific skills. I want to hear like questions that you're going to have around the qualities that are really applied qualities. There's very unique skills that we can bring into our facilitation, and even if we're doing something like a community member role or co-facilitator role, these are all they're very practical and specific practices. But what I really want to just convey again tonight and with you is building your presence and supporting you in getting what you need to be in your life as fully as possible, to show up for others as fully as possible. So I hope that this is coherent and making sense so far. And I'm always happy to talk more about the details of the process itself, because I just love how every single circle is unique, and every single human being has something to bring to the awareness and growth of whether it's conflict related or not. So I made up a list, since we're already getting close to being done for the evening and we haven't really even begun. I did make up a list of the qualities and the skills that I wanted to look at with you that are presence-oriented and practically oriented. So the practical list that you see on the, if you're obviously facing the screen on the left side here, those are going to be really intertwined with the applied practices we talk about next week, very specific. And presence-oriented, you know, today is where we're at with some overlap. But I wanted to hear, after you look at this presence-oriented list especially, what else do you feel is really important to show up in full presence that isn't listed here, perhaps? Please chime in at any time. And if you disagree or don't resonate with one of these, by all means chime in as well. And I do want to point out, while you might be getting the juices flowing for some comments, that this piece around the paradox of equanimity is so important. And I don't know how I came. This is not a term that I got from somewhere. It's probably already out there, and I'm sorry if I'm not citing it correctly. But when I think of the paradox of equanimity as it applies to justice and conflict, I think about our human resistance to realizing that we've all been an offender and we've all been a victim. We've been everything. Whether it's intentionally or not, we have played the roles. All the roles that sit in the circle, we have been there. So if we can hold that with a level of humility and self-awareness, of course, the first item there, where we're orienting ourselves in presence, that, I believe, is such a critical piece of coming to the table in knowing that, you know, we've been there, we've done that, we also have done that, and we can hold each other in that way. It's a big piece. So is there anything that you can think of that is really important to you around how you come to the table in your work in restorative practices that comes to mind right now? And we can also look at the practical, but I'd like to look at that next week, this list that's on the left side. And again, don't be shy.
Hi, Molly. This is Ron in San Luis Obispo.
Hi, Ron.
Hi. And so one thing that I always try and do when we have our circle group each week is to just kind of get a little bit charged up and have a real positive regard for those as they enter the room and greeting them, helping to set a good tone at the beginning. I don't know if that fits in with this or not, but
That's wonderful. It definitely does. Presence-oriented for oneself also means presence-oriented for the group. You know,
yes.
would you be willing to describe a little bit more of how you presence each person arriving?
Oh, I do a group in a men's prison, so it's
Uh-huh.
kind of a handshake, eye contact, a caring word or something. Just check in with them as they enter the room. So,
Wonderful. Yeah. Acknowledgement,
yes.
right? Is that correct? Acknowledgement.
Yes.
Such a simple concept, but so huge. Acknowledgement. One thing, if I may, that I feel like I've missed on this presence-oriented list is presencing identity. And of course, again, presencing the honoring of the lands upon which we are walking. Presencing the intersectionality and representation in the room in whatever way seems appropriate. And I would love to hear from anyone on those points, how you might be doing that and bringing that into the space. How do you feel about that? Full presence of our bodies, yeah, absolutely. Dropping in with breath, practices that I'm not sure if you all resonated with the heart resonance practice that we did to begin today, but in some ways that is directly linked in a roundabout manner to the belief that the Haudenosaunee and Six Nations had of giving thanks, and that once we connected our minds as one through giving thanks, we could then go into talking about important things. That belief stays with me. I've been lucky to learn from so many Indigenous teachers, and I love how that links to, the understanding that once we presence and acknowledge and give thanks, we can then do the more difficult work at hand because our minds are one and our hearts.
Thank you.
Attributing positive intentions to others. Thank you, Padmaja. Yep. I'm so glad you're here, Padmaja. Thank you. If you want to speak more about that, please feel free to open up your mic if you wish. Stas says, what tradition was it from? That's the Six Nations Haudenosaunee tradition of Thanksgiving, really, of giving thanks. The belief and practice was that when they came together as a tribe, as a community, to do any kind of important discussion or dialogue, the first thing they would do, even with their so-called enemies, would be they would go around and do a Thanksgiving process, which included everything from the sky to the rivers to the winged ones to the rock people. They would go quite extensively and in depth and feel it on many levels. And they knew that that would help to bring them to a level of ability to then really respond to the challenges at hand or to do whatever they needed to do to try and make some peace, depending on the situation. Haudenosaunee. I don't know how to spell it very well, but Six Nations. Oh yeah, it is amazing, isn't it? Jennifer says amazing. I couldn't agree more. That's why it's so important for us to turn our attention back to our elders and our teachers from all the indigenous practices of the world have a lot to tell us and share with us. So I built, I know we only have 10 minutes or so left. I really would like to get to another practice with you. I'm just looking here at which one, we could do a group choice tonight of what we would like to look at as far as our second practice for the evening together. I'm going to just plant a seed for you right now before I talk about the slide in front of you. The practices that I brought that I wanted to share, if I would have been quicker with sharing with you tonight, were, first of all, a very brief Thanksgiving practice from Elder Sequoia Trueblood of the Choctaw tribe. He's a teacher and an elder. The practice is a video of him sharing the great thanks, great peace, great love triangle practice. It's a brief meditation video. It's about 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes long. The second one would be another guided meditation exploring what gives you meaning in the service that you're doing, looking at your meaning and what empowers you to be fully present and thriving in the work that you do. The third practice was more of a mini lecture from Mickey Singer, who is an internationally known author of The Untethered Soul, and it's focused on the witness. So those are the 3 practices that are included in this slide deck that you'll be getting tonight. If you'd like to close out with one of them in particular, I think I'm sensing we would do the Sequoia Trueblood practice, which is brief but very profound. So that's my 2 cents, but let me know your thoughts here in just a moment. Think about which one feels most resonant to you. So I just built up this quick little diagram of the interlapping circles, of course, of spirit, mind, and body. And the heart in the middle is the critical aspect of having that sangha of trust and your support systems. We are deeply communal beings, and we need to have those support systems in place, especially when we are processing. And there's some practices that I have to process that heavy energy, that deep conflict that a lot of us are facing, that sometimes, especially if we're sensitive people, if we're empaths, we can have it be absorbed in our personal systems. There's ways in which to avoid that, and hopefully most of us know how to avoid absorbing that really heavy energy, which is a part of being human. It's a part of the mix of duality here on planet Earth in our human realm. But knowing how to keep it from impacting you, taking away from your full cup as much as possible, while also giving it due diligence, is really important. So we're going to go around really quick here. Some of the things that are most essential, I have body at the bottom of the Triskelion of sorts, because of the fact that everything starts with our health physically. If we don't have our physical health, it's very difficult to move into these other spheres fully. So again, this aspect of being outdoors and either reconnecting or deepening our breath. So obvious, but like, how many of us have actually really practiced deep breathing and also our response systems when we get triggered? Breath can really be a very powerful tool that all we have to do is practice to signal to ourselves when we notice ourselves losing our our regulatory balance, come back to breath. So we can really pattern ourselves in very positive and proactive ways, no matter what is going on in the external circumstance. And I'm still working on it myself, I promise you. I am not an expert. I'm on this journey with and for you, and together we continue to explore how we can better serve. So yoga and the circulation of our energy is really important. Some of you are probably a lot further along the yoga path. I happen to practice Kriya Yoga. It's a form of hatha and devotional practice. It's I'm a believer that all religious teachings have an element of deep good in them that we all can distill and choose for our own purposes of empowerment and self-realization. But the importance of our circuits being firing and healthy is without doubt important. And Eastern medicine points out that to us with our meridians. I highly recommend craniosacral work that also just really looks at the synovial fluid, or if I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's the fluid in our spine. And when that's not moving, energy is being stuck. Our body will tell us. We know from the work of Bessel van der Kolk, he's a doctor who penned the book, The Body Keeps the Score. Definitely going to be in the resource section for you. Can't recommend it more. Trauma, it stays in our bodies. It's housed in our bodies. We know this, right? So eating clean and fasting. I'm still working on the eating clean part. I still eat meat. I live at a high elevation, and I've convinced myself that I need to eat meat. But eating clean is so important to our bodies, to our vehicles. Exercise, body as feedback system. So I've covered those. Exercise is such a great way. Even 15 minutes a day of elevating your cardiovascular rate. There's a formula that I'm sure most of you know, how to increase your heart rate, get it up there at 70 to 70%, I think, is the healthy area, depending on your age and your resting rate. So from our bodies, then we can look at the other two areas more deeply. I'm not saying ignore them, but just that we have a fuller cup and we can show up more fully to be a channel for the service and the things that want to come through us in service to others. And gratitude is so huge. It's not just some woo-woo fantasy that gratitude and being thankful, it doesn't mean denying what our pains and our challenges are. It just means that we're firing up our brains in a positive direction. Where attention goes, energy grows. So gratitude is a way of really helping ourselves to stay focused in the right direction, even as we face the difficulties that, of course, we all have. Meditation and prayer. Prayer has power. We know this. Again, all these great science projects that have been going on even most recently in the past decade. I used to work at the Institute of Noetic Sciences in the Bay Area, and I was a part of some experiments on intention and on how we have limited sight and seeing. There's a lot of scientific evidence out there that backs up the importance of setting intention and the power of our prayer in whatever way we see fit, even if it's simply putting someone into our awareness with our heart behind that. Our emotions are a feedback system. How we can show up to help people feel safe to safely express their emotions is critical. And for us to feel like we have the opportunity to also be held and seen for our emotional needs. Very important. And then over in the mind category, and that's a very quick breeze through that we can revisit. We can come back to this next week if you would like, so that you can add to these areas if you feel so moved. The mind area is so important, and there's so much neuroscience out there that points towards trauma and its impact on the brain. And so as we step in as practitioners, the more we can read up, train up, have conversations with people who have done studies, read books that are, you know, verified, studies on the aspects of neuropsychology and the impacts of trauma on the brain. I think the better we will be able to show up now and in the future to understand that the brain really is the last frontier of our human understanding. Even with the most eloquent neuroscientists and psychiatrists, we still have so much to learn about how our brain shows up or doesn't, and how it informs the way our children are behaving, you know, with all the distractions and the things going on with technology, more so than ever today. Our mind and understanding it is absolutely critical. I know it's 7:01 here in the Mountain Time Zone, in where I'm sitting in Ute territory here in Colorado, but I do want to, if you don't mind, take a few more minutes, and then I want to know who would like to take a look at that Sequoia True Blood practice to close out tonight. The beginner's mind practice comes from Shunryu Suzuki and Zen, and the importance of keeping our minds open, that we're not experts and that we're here to learn and to learn from each other, regardless of these hierarchical structures that are omnipresent in our cultural systems. I also highly recommend binaural beats, which is a whole brain earbud experience that helps children and adults alike to tap into what's called, like, for example, the Schumann resonance, which is 7.83 hertz. And that is the resonance of our earth. And it's been shown that when we tune in and listen to that frequency, it helps to naturally regulate us and bring us back to our center. So I could say more right now, but I'm going to pause and open it up to you. What would you like to do tonight as far as those practices? Which one resonates most with you? Like I said, my suggestion would be the practice with Sequoia True Blood, which is just a brief 3-minute, if you're willing to stay with me. How does that sound? I'm looking at your questions here. Okay, what gives you meaning? Yes, that one was one of the options. Carmen, that was a meditation that I could guide tonight or next time. And it looks like people are chiming in also around the practice that you see in front of you on the slide. So, okay, thank you. Thanks, Carmen. We'll do it next time. We need so much time for this class. Why is it only 2 times? I wonder. All right. Let's see here. I'm going to open up my browser because I don't want to click. Here we go. I just need to grab the link. And I'm hoping that the audio comes through for you. Can you give me a heads up if you heard that introductory audio? Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Ron. Okay, so this video, I'm gonna make sure that I'm sharing the correct screen at this point. Thanks for your patience. Here we go. That should be the ticket. I'm really glad to hear that the sound works. So this is Sequoia True Blood, Choctaw Elder. This is a basic practice to support your presence And I'll come back briefly after we look at this together so that we can close out, but we won't be too much longer.
Sowing along the beach, prayers, thanks with peace, with love, and our sister the ocean will take those prayers to every shore on this mother earth. Is that easy? So I get up around 5 every morning. I do I do prayer. So I sat down to do that this morning, and all of a sudden, I heard this voice saying to me, "This is the path to peace." And it came to me in the Mohawk language. Yawadoa, Skonadoa, and Wawadoa. It was a big triangle there I was looking at. Yawadoa, great thanks at the top. Skonadoa, great peace at the bottom leg of the triangle there. Wawadoa, great love at the other bottom of the triangle. Around this triangle, big circle. And in the center of it, I saw a heart. And I jumped up, and I normally go right and right down. And I drew this triangle, and I put those words in there, English. So great thanks, great love. And that's how that emerged. And I've just been sharing that with people ever since. It's so simple. It's a way, it's a blueprint. It's a way to help people see in a very simple way that path of peace. So be thankful for everything, and forgiveness is there, as I said, and acceptance is there. There's no room for any judgment, which means now we're at peace. It's very simple. And then when we're at peace, then the peace of love is there, and it's very clear to us then what that heart of love is, and that's compassion. And accepting everybody else where they are, when they're hurting, acting crazy, that we still accept them that way. We stand in front of them as a mirror of what peace and love look like, regardless of what we're doing, without any judgment whatsoever. That's compassion.
Okay, so as we round out our time together, I'm going to go ahead and do a quick little screen share again with you to come back to our purpose and what we're going to be focusing on next week, which of course are very ground level practices and essential skills for facilitation. Of course, this isn't a facilitation class per se, but these are qualities that translate to very important practices that we want to be bringing with us as best we can. And I'm having a little trouble finding which screen to share here. Thank you for your patience. I opened up this big screen for that video. So while I'm getting back to the closing slide, does anyone want to chime in about that short segment with Sequoia? And then we'll close. Okay. I know that we've covered so much territory tonight together. And let me just grab my video so that I can see you all and say goodnight. I wanted to just say again, oh, I'm sorry to hear that the audio was choppy on that. I am going to include the video link in your resources, which you'll be receiving within the next day. So after we close tonight, I'm going to put together a package of resources and the slide deck for you so that you can check those out and be thinking about anything that was most relevant for you tonight so that we can, you know, talk about what might be most important through the next week in email. If you'd like to reflect with me in email or to book your session, if you haven't already, that's a 2-hour, up to 2-hour session of private consults. I'm a coach, I'm a witness, and I also have this hands-on experience in facilitation and program work. So like I mentioned, within courts, with youth, I've worked in reentry programs. I've done a lot of different aspects of service, and I've been grateful to learn everything that I have learned. It's been devastating at times as well. So please know that I hold these sessions in the utmost confidentiality. And so that if you have things you would like to discuss that are very private and personal, they are absolutely confidential between us. I know that programs work and individual work is, you know, very difficult and private area to be sharing with anyone. So I'm honored that you would bring any of your challenges to me if you wish. And on that note, what Sequoia said, Yamagoa is great thanks. Skonagoa, from great thanks, we go into Skonagoa, great peace. And from that place of great peace into great love. And he recommends meditating on that image. And I'm going to provide for you more information about his work as well as that image itself that you can look at if you wish, if you're drawn to it in particular. So before we close, is anything else needing to be addressed or heard tonight from our circle and community? I'm looking at the chat, if you see me looking to the side here. So everybody, thank you. It's a sacred honor to be a guide for classes like this. I, of course, take it very seriously, but I also like to laugh. Thanks for your patience if some of this information was redundant. I hope there were some gold gems in here for you to take with you on your path. I'm looking forward to seeing you next week. We're going to dive into those essential practices and the qualities that we can bring to specifically offer those with ourselves, with our staff, and with our circles. So on behalf of Restorative Justice on the Rise Webcation, thank you so much for being here live with me tonight as a learning community or as a participant in watching this at your own pace. Good night, everybody. Thank you.